Hello everybody and welcome to this online session, information session for the Bachelor of Fine Arts Technical Theatre Stage Management course at NIDA. My name is Graham Henstock and I'm NIDA's Director for the Centre for Technology, Production and Management. I'm also the course leader for the Bachelor of Fine Arts Technical Theatre and Stage Management course. I just want to start by acknowledging that I'm speaking to you today from the unceded lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I want to pay my respects to their elders past, present and future, and also acknowledge that NIDA sits on the unceded lands of the Bidjigal and Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. I hope that you are all safe and well, no matter where you happen to be in the country. And if you're like me, currently in lockdown, I hope that you're weathering that okay during this sort of challenging time. So as part of today's session, I'm going to do a little bit of a presentation about the Technical Theatre and Stage Management course. Some of you may already be familiar with this information if you came to our open day. I'm going to do a little bit of a truncated version of that. At the end of that, I'll open up for questions and answers or a Q&A session. If you have any sort of Q&A sort of questions, please put them into the chat and you should be able to send them through to me. Okay, let's get underway. First, I just want to give you a little bit of an insight, some images from this year's production season, which features some of the work that was being done by technical theatre and stage management students. So NIDA's Bachelor of Fine Arts Technical Theatre and Stage Management degree is a 3-year undergraduate degree that is focused on all of the work that happens behind the scenes in live performance, in events and those sort of environments. And it's particularly about sort of the skills of stage management, production management, lighting, sound, video. It is very sort of much a holistic a course which is factored around or worked around the idea that students who understand how all of the elements that are in a live production space come together are then able to kind of realise those productions in the best possible way, but also have good career sustainability and take those careers out into the industry, do incredible work. You know, there are other degrees that sort of around the country that are much more specialist in how they approach things. We still have room for specialisation in the way that we approach our degrees, but what we try to do is create the practitioner who has a good understanding of all of the elements, and we think that has pretty positive outcomes. In terms of the structure of the course, in the first year of the degree, students are very much focused on foundational skills and knowledge. So they're learning about the kind of key pillars that of the degree. They're learning about stage management, lighting, sound and video, with a little bit of a focus on things like production management, but also the whole picture of how a production goes together. So we're talking about production processes, production timelines, and teaching a lot of kind of fundamental skills and knowledge in that first year. In the second year, students start to increase their knowledge, and they also start to think about the way that all those different disciplines come together. So we start to do projects which are more based around combining the skills of stage management and technical theatre and having real kind of production outcomes. So there's a whole series of little projects that happen in the second year, and they include things like a video for live performance project, where all the students develop a short basically performance, but that is working with, how do we bring video into that live performance space, and how do we, actually use that technology in a way that is about storytelling, that's about artistry, rather than just as kind of a visual, addition. Students also do in their second year a magic show, which is entirely about learning the skill of theatrical illusion. Magic is kind of almost the purest form of technical theatre and stage management, in that for us to kind of maintain that illusion, to create the illusion of magic on stage, actually requires all of those elements to work together. So the effect has to be lit properly to hide the mechanism. There has to be maybe sound to cover any sound created by the mechanism. It has to be performed perfectly to be able to get to a point that sort of the illusion is kept. It has to be stage managed effectively, so the calls all happen at the same time. So in that second year, like through what looks like the vehicle of a magic show, is actually a masterclass in how these students can realise their skills and utilise their skills. In those first 2 years, the basic structure of the year is that there are 4 terms, and we alternate between teaching terms and what we call production terms. So in teaching terms, there's a lot of classes, and that means that students are on site with us from 9 AM until 6 PM for 5 days a week. In that particular type of environment, the students are not doing any one day that's the same. Each day will kind of change and mix it up in terms of what skills they're being exposed to. And it's also still it's not like we're sitting entirely in classrooms the entire time. Instead, there's a lot of practical projects that are going on. This is a very hands-on practical degree, which is completely underpinned by an academic understanding of the theory behind what we do. That's actually probably a really key point to make. NIDA's students, and what NIDA's environment is about creating practicing artists. We're not just learning the theory, although knowing the theory makes everybody a better practitioner. Our goal is to make working artists, working practitioners who will go off into the industry and have long and successful careers. So in that first term where we're doing little projects and things, students are doing lighting, sound, workplace health and safety, stage management. There's a little bit of stuff around sort of rigging and how to tie basic knots, just how to work in a staging environment or a stage production environment. Then the second term is a production term. Now that's one of the greatest strengths of what we do at NIDA. During the production terms, all of the courses come together to realise a series of productions that are kind of a scale and a nature that is comparable to many professional companies. In those moments, students learn how to collaborate and work with other students and practitioners from a whole range of different disciplines. It means that whilst there are these productions are going on, the actors in them are coming from the acting course, the set designs are coming from our design for performance course, the costumes are being made by our costume course, and then the technical theatre and stage management course is providing students who are doing lighting design, sound design, stage management, production management, video design, and stage crews and technical support, and all of those sort of roles that go along with that sort of behind the scenes work. It's actually an amazing experience because these students who bring their own artistry and their own skill and their expertise in their own discipline get to then work with each other to produce something that's absolutely incredible. So we devote pretty much an entire term then to delivering productions, which is in that second term. Then in the third term we come back, and for first year students, that third term is mostly about them starting to think about how they might create their own work. So rather than have us say to them, this is the work we want you to do, we have a structure which we call, it's a project called Theatre Exercise, we have a structure where they are encouraged to come up with their own idea, and then with the support of tutors and with the resources of NIDA, we put on a presentation of a whole series of like 5-minute pieces that have been developed by the technical theatre and stage management students. And then what they do is provide support to each other through that project. So it starts with every student has to put on their own little 5-minute piece, but the other students have to act in it, stage manage it, light it, develop the sound design with them. And then once that 5-minute piece is finished, all the students then rotate or move to other roles on another student's 5-minute piece. And what that project then does is allow those students to walk away with an experience of all the roles that go into putting on a production. Our fourth term for first years is another production term where they are working either in technical crewing roles or assistant stage management roles, and they're really once again back in that collaboration with all of the other cohorts, and it's quite an amazing time. The end of the year for first year students is then about our Festival of Emerging Artists, and it's the time that the students take on a higher level of responsibility. It's their first chance to take on a full design role, maybe in sound design or video design, or to take on a calling stage management role, so a deputy stage manager. In second year, the first term is once again about small projects, lots of classes, but they're very practical projects. I've already mentioned the Video for Live Performance project, but students are also going through projects around sort of technical design and also projects around technical documentation. Second term is a production term. In the third term is a module where students learn about what we call storytelling through technology. So we highlight experiences and practitioners where like artistry or theatre making has technology at its core. So that often involves emerging technology such as virtual reality or augmented reality, but also looking at more traditional forms of technology and how they might work in our theatre space. Also in that third term is the magic show that I mentioned earlier. Fourth term for second years is another production term. Then when we get to the third year, things get very different for technical theatre and stage management students. In the third year, students are still coming back and they're doing production roles, and at that point they're doing much more senior roles. They're working either as technical designers, lighting design, sound design or video design, or they're working in senior management roles such as a production manager, what we call a production stage manager, a technical manager or an event manager. And they're working on those productions once again in collaboration with other peers, but also with the other year groups. Also in that third year, all technical theatre and stage management students do a minimum of 10 weeks of industry placement. That means that in collaboration with our industry partners, they are going out into industry and getting kind of, immersed hands-on experience in what those environments are and what those work practices are. In fact, many of the students or many graduates' first job upon graduation comes out of the experiences they have whilst on secondment or on placement. So students do a minimum of 10 weeks. Some students will do more than 10 weeks. They're allowed to. Some really keen ones will do up to 20 or 25 weeks of placement, which is an amazing introduction into industry and an amazing sort of foot in the door with a whole range of kind of important companies and people. The other thing that students do in their third year is they have an independently driven research project where they all pick a topic that's of specific interest to them, and they then research that topic in significant depth. So a student who sort of foresees themselves becoming a stage manager when they graduate will probably pick a topic around stage management, and it might be something like how do you work with animals on a stage, or it might be how do you work with a digital prompt copy. A student who wants to become a lighting designer or a sound designer may pick something that's associated with those technologies. So that third year is factored around the idea that students are going to spend between 6 and 8 weeks on their research project, going in depth into a topic that is relevant to their personal practice, but also relevant potentially to the industry and relevant to kind of their broader careers. Which is a good sort of segue in to talk about what those potential careers are. The structure of the TTSM degree, or the Technical Theatre and Stage Management degree, is that we don't require students to select a particular discipline. They can leave us as all-rounders, which is actually not a bad way to work because it means that they have more career sustainability. You know, even if they're more passionate about one discipline or another, the fact that they have the skills and knowledge to move sideways and pick up work in different parts of the industry, especially in those first 2 years after graduation, is a real benefit to them. But those students will often pick a discipline. So not everyone will leave just as an all-rounder. The students who go, okay, I really want to be a stage manager, will leave as stage managers. And in fact, for most of the major kind of commercial musicals, state theatre companies, production companies around the country, the backbone of the stage management teams tend to be from NIDA graduates. Students will also leave as lighting designers, sound designers, production managers, video designers. We have some students who move across into what we call becoming mechanists, which is, you know, moving the various elements on stage and understanding more of the stage mechanics. When we do our sort of surveys and we see what students are doing, when they're out in the industry for 3 years, we tend to see that almost every single student, like over 95%, is in consistent employment. Now, we say consistent employment because it's not the type of industry where we can say that they're in permanent employment, because actually people tend to freelance, which means that they go from job to job. So when I say consistent employment, I mean it is their primary form of employment, and that's the way that they're making their living. What's interesting is if we go further out, if we go to 10 years out, you know, we still see that 90% of the graduates from 10 years ago are still working in the industry they were trained for. If we go even further out, to 20 years out, that number drops slightly, but it only drops to about 80 to 85%. So 80 to 85% of the graduates from this course, 20 years out, are still working in some way in the industry that they were trained for. So that's thinking about what happens when students leave us. When students are with us, what we're offering is a kind of immersive, very tailored learning experience. Students at NIDA are working in small cohorts. We take about 15 per year, sometimes a couple or more, sometimes a couple less, but we aim for 15 students per year, which means that students are working in smaller classes. They're working in smaller groups. The student to tutor ratio is very high. There are 4 full-time staff members in the Technical Theatre and Stage Management course, but we use around 50 industry guests or professionals as tutors who will come in and support students, guide students, or work with them in, you know, a specific area of discipline. So if we want to bring in someone to teach production management, the sort of person we might bring in, and we have been bringing in recent years, will be a lead production manager from, say, Sydney Theatre Company, and they will deliver that element. And then somebody else will come in and may teach an element of video design, and they'll be a lead video designer from one of those kind of other major companies. So we're bringing in those industry practitioners. It's also worth noting that of the 4 full-time NIDA staff members, we've all been practicing practitioners and working professionally in the industry. That connection to practice, that connection to industry, is a real key point of what this degree offers. Now, I won't try to deceive you in any sort of way. The hours are long. This is a hard course. We cover a lot of information, and we do push students in terms of trying to emulate as much as we can what happens in industry in terms of sometimes those working hours. That means that students are with us from 9 to 6 most days. And when we're doing productions, it's not uncommon for students to be with us from 9 AM to 11 PM, sometimes for 6 days in a row, sometimes for 3 weeks in a row. The reason we do that is that's the type of environment that students will encounter when they get into industry. And the feedback we get from industry is that they prefer our graduates over the graduates of any other course because of the fact that our students already understand what it is to work in those sort of environments. They have the resilience, they have the understanding, and they have the training to make them excellent practitioners and professionals. Whilst that is kind of the scary part of things, those hours and the workload, the other thing that happens because of our small class sizes and the way that we work is that the students form lifelong friendships. They find their creative soulmates, their creative collaborators, that they then go on to work with throughout their entire careers. What we see is that the students will basically become like a little family. And when they leave, they continue to support each other in the industry. So we see situations where a student will pick up a job maybe as a production manager, and when they need a stage manager, the first people they call is their previous cohort or their previous peers, and they bring them to continue to work with them. So that NIDA community, the NIDA network, in terms of how that community supports each other, both whilst at NIDA and out into the industry, is an incredible strength. So in terms of the application process, applications are live now. And what that means is that you can go onto the NIDA website and download, put in your application and download the information pack about how to apply. The process is that we ask you to do a small project. There's around 10 plays that have been listed or projects that have been listed, and you need to pick one of them and then show us how you would stage that production. How you show us is up to you. We realise that not everybody is going to be the greatest model maker or illustrator, and for the sort of work that or the sort of students that we're looking for, we're not looking necessarily for the people who can do those sort of things the best. What we're looking for is people who have good ideas about theatre and who have a passion for the art form and who are ready to engage with our training. So what we're looking for in your application is that you have been able to read a script, understand the context of that script, and then start to think imaginatively about how you might stage that, but also then think pragmatically about what any sort of staging choices might mean. For example, if one scene is set on a beach and the next scene is set in a lounge room, how are you going to switch between those two environments? How many people might be involved to make that change happen? Are you going to do it with a set change, or are you going to do it just through lighting and sound? Any of those choices are completely valid. We want to see how you will think about doing those sort of things. You will then work on that project and you'll present your ideas to us. It could be through a model. It could be through some storyboards. It could be a set of sketches and mood boards. It could be a digital model. Whatever form best allows you to communicate your ideas, we don't mind. Bring that form to the application process. We will then be doing interviews with all of our with most of the applicants or all the applicants to talk through why their project, and we'll discuss that sort of. It's about a 45-minute interview where we will talk through your project, talk through your ideas. The key thing there is it's fairly informal. There'll be 4 people on a panel talking to you, but we want you to be good. We want you to be successful. So really, we just want you to be you, and we want you to show us your ideas, the way that you think about theatre, and why you want to come to NIDA. The first half of the interview process will be about your project. The second half will be about those more general things. Where do you see yourself in a career? Why is NIDA your choice? For us, we're trying to determine, is this the right course for you? Is this the right path for you? Now that concludes my slightly truncated version of, a course talk that some of you may have seen on Open Day. What I'm going to do now is open up for questions that anyone might have. Does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask about the Technical Theatre and Stage Management course? Okay, I've got some questions there in the chat. There's a question that says, if we have experience in event management but not stage management, would we still be considered? Absolutely. Many of those skills are transferable between environments. Whilst we whilst we are using kind of the theatre process as the frame, those skills that you learn about management, about technical design, about technical equipment are absolutely transferable to other areas. And equally, people who have had experiences in those other areas, their skill set and their knowledge and their interest is absolutely transferable back across to stage management and to those sort of skills. So absolutely, if you've got an interest in other areas, or you've worked in other areas and now have an interest in sort of what we're offering, you will be considered for those sort of things. There's a question there about what is the application panel looking for in an applicant and for them to be successful and offered a place in the course. I've addressed some of that already in terms of that we're looking for people who are imaginative, but also passionate about their craft. What I will say is that you don't need to have a huge amount of previous skill and knowledge to get into the course. We're going to teach you the skills. We're going to teach you how to work in these environments. So what we want you to bring is a desire to learn and a desire to sort of really to really sort of embrace the challenges and the ideas that we present to you, because we can teach you everything else. What we can't teach you is the passion. So if you possess that passion, if theatre, live events, production, if that's all something that you would deeply care about and deeply want to do, that's the main thing that we're going to look for in an interview. Now, you can demonstrate that to us partly by the things that you may have done, but I'm also very aware that some people will not have access to all of the kind of resources to be able to go and do a lot of things. If people have been doing HSCs and those sort of environments, it may be more challenging for them to be doing a lot of theatre. So then we're going to be saying, well, are you going to see a show, or what are you thinking about theatre? And we can judge that passion through other sort of environments as well, or other questions. I've got some questions there. There's a question there about where are some of the places that people do third-year placements. It's really broad. In our current kind of COVID environment, it is been very much restricted to Australia, although a couple of years ago there were a number of students who used to go internationally. But students can be going anywhere within Australia that they can arrange a placement for, and then people are doing work. Obviously, lockdowns notwithstanding. We have kind of very established relationships with a whole range of partners, and that includes a lot of the major companies, a lot of the major musicals, and we had state theatre companies, dance companies, event companies. And what tends to happen is each year when they're announcing their season for the next year is they'll reach out to us and say, here's the shows that we're doing next year. Can you please let the students know? And if anyone's interested in coming and doing a placement, we'll help arrange that for them. But that's one pathway through into how people do placements. And so we end up with students down on everything through that pathway on, like, say, Opera Australia, Sydney Theatre Company, Melbourne Theatre Company, Belvoir, Sydney Dance Company, Sydney Festival, Adelaide Festival, Melbourne Festival. There's a whole range of those kind of things that come out of that. Dark Mofo, we've had students down at in the past. The other path that happens is that students will identify a company or a practitioner that they really want to have an experience from. And so they will then reach out to those practitioners and say, hey, I'm a student at NIDA, I'm on my third year. Can I come and spend some time with you? Can I come and see how you work and sort of, and see how you make work? In most instances, people are really open to that. They understand that placements are part of what we do, and so they will then create those opportunities. So that's the second pathway, which is kind of the student-initiated approach to secondments. And in those environments, it could be absolutely anybody who's at least relevant to their practice. So, in that sort of environments, we've had people, spend time with Damien Cooper, who's a very well-known lighting designer, with Nate Edmondson, who's a very well-known sound designer. We've had people sort of go and spend time with really bespoke companies, people like the Snuff Puppets out of Melbourne, or Chunky Move Dance Company out of Melbourne. So really, then students get to pick how they will approach those sort of things. I'm just having a look at the other questions here. There's a question there about, is the application process now for starting in February 2021? That's correct. That's for the first year. So the application that's open now would be to start in February 2022. There's a question here about sort of how does the course structure transition if needing to be taught online, especially in terms of productions and collaborative work. That's a really kind of timely question, and I know that at this moment in time it's quite challenging. But we're still doing classes at the moment, and we are still doing practical projects at the moment, and we are still working with students in whatever way we can within the current restrictions to have them practicing their craft. In 2020, when we were in lockdown, the way that we realised productions is through what we called our digital theatre season. And that meant that we developed a whole series of productions that, rather than having to be completely realised in a theatre, were developed for online platforms, but still involved all of those skills around sort of, rehearsals, and then managing rehearsals, managing production processes, thinking about lighting design, sound design, video design. And instead of, presenting them to a live audience, we adapted them specifically for different platforms, such as the Twitch gaming platform or for YouTube and so on. When we did those productions, they weren't just a film. They were very much a theatre show with a live audience who happened to be engaging with us through a digital interface. And that meant that students were still running things very much in a theatre and live production process. And they were working in small groups or bubbles in the ways following very strict COVID protocols. And that allowed us to keep doing things and creating work with them to the best of our ability, given the curveball that had been thrown to us by COVID. In terms of the question about the course being delivered if COVID restrictions continue into next year, there's a question here that someone has said, are there thoughts to how to deliver the course will be delivered in lockdown COVID restrictions in next year, particularly with regards to production terms? The course will still continue in that sort of way. We are adapting. In fact, every time we have to do it, we're getting better at on-time delivery. Is it our preferred way of working? Not at all. We would much prefer to have students working together, being able to produce work in the same environments or in the same theatres. But at the same time, we can still achieve a lot with, as long as we're being careful and we're really thinking about the Okay, I think that my internet just dropped out, but I think that I'm back. Naomi, can you give me a heads up if I'm a thumbs up if I'm back? Excellent. Okay, so what I was just saying is that in terms of next year, our assumption is that we will be able to be in the building and that we'll still be working with students as much as we can, probably with COVID protocols in place around social distancing and those sort of things if we need to, but we'll be able to produce work. And we imagine that whilst we will always react to whatever the current health guidelines are and the government guidelines are regarding things, we are constantly working to make sure that we can produce the best learning outcomes for students, within the scope of whatever those restrictions may be. Okay, I'm going to go a bit further down. There's some other questions here. There's a question that says, in terms of the application process, if we are personally focusing on stage management, is it okay for that our project reflects that focus instead of a design focus? Absolutely. We don't think that at the point that you're applying for the course that you will necessarily know a huge amount about lighting or sound or stage management. You'll probably know about whatever area you've previously had a bit of experience. That's what you know, show us that. Okay, we're looking for potential. We're not looking for you to come and show us that you already have all the skills that we're going to teach. Right? So, but what I would also say about that is that every one of you is going to be, you have your own kind of experience and background and interests. It's only natural that when you present something to us, that you will lean into that and show us a little bit about who you are and what your craft might be. There's another question here that says, how does the degree compare to the diploma? Is there a minimum Atar for consideration? So the first thing, I'm going to answer the second bit first, which is to say that NIDA doesn't look at Atars. Our application process is via audition. We do ask that students have finished Year 12, just because there is some academic elements, or there are definitely academic elements to the degree. So we want to know that you can work at that level. But the reality is that the best artists aren't necessarily the best people with the best Atars. So we want to actually treat every person as an individual. We want to speak to you individually, and we want to understand who you are as an artist and what you might bring to this course and bring to your practice. And if we see potential there, then that's the most important thing for us. In terms of how the degree to compare to the diploma, they're two very, very different courses. The focus on the one-year diploma is very much around creating technical crew. So people who will go out and work in crewing roles, and there's lots of crewing roles in the industry, and there's good employment outcomes from that course, in that people will go out and they'll work on lighting crews or sound crews or stage crews and those sort of things. This degree, the 3-year degree, is actually about a step beyond that. It's about creating leaders of industry. It's about creating the people who will be leading those teams. So if we think about those 3rd-year roles, which are stage manager, production manager, lighting designer, sound designer, maybe head of a technical department. If you want to put it in a slightly different way, we're preparing people to go out in those jobs. They tend to go out in those jobs very, very quickly, whereas the diploma is kind of more aimed at creating the people who will work for the people who are coming out of the degree. Both courses, though, are very practically orientated. They both involve a lot of hands-on experience of doing the various works, the productions. The Bachelor of Fine Arts course, however, would also go a lot more into kind of the history and the theory and kind of the context about these skills and how you use them. Okay, do we have any other questions there? Okay, I'll just give it a minute in case anyone has another question they want to pop into the chat. Just to go over another something else around the course, as I mentioned before, we take around 15 per year. A lot of people think that if somebody is 18 and just leaving Year 12, that they're not eligible for the course. That's not true. The general makeup of our intake, generally about half of the course will be school leavers who have come directly to us and show potential. The other half will be people who may have had a gap year, had a bit of time off, or gone and done a previous degree, or maybe even a mature age student who goes, actually now I really want to focus in on my passion and my interest of theatre. So please don't think that if you're 17, 18 that you can't apply for this course. You absolutely can. And what happens then, is you'll be in a cohort, if you're successful, of 15 people who will range in age from 17, 18 through to probably 30 or mid 30s, and you'll get a reasonable spread of those sort of ages across the course. Okay. If we're not seeing any other questions pop up there, then that might be. Okay, I'm giving you a last chance. You're all on notice. One more chance to sort of put some questions into that chat. And if there's nothing, okay. So to wrap things up, this is a very dynamic degree. It's a degree that has extraordinary employment outcomes, where students go out and work in a whole range of different fields and different disciplines. And they produces graduates that are absolutely sought after by the industry, but also graduates who are capable of creating their own work. If you have any other questions after this about the application process, you can reach out to NIDA, and I'm very happy to have a chat with anybody, or to also respond to emails and those sort of things. So if you contact our applications department and you then send a question through, we will get back to you and be able to answer any questions that you might have. If there's no more questions, we might wrap things up there. But thank you very much to everybody for coming to this session. I hope it's been informative, and I hope to meet some of you during our application process later in the year. Thank you very much.